Hi friends, I hope you're fine and doing well. In this video, I'd like to tell you about error treatment, but prior to that, I think I need to define errors and mistakes because these two terms are not used interchangeably in English language teaching. When we speak about errors, we're in fact talking about those problems in students' writing samples, in their speaking, that are rooted in their lack of knowledge. Sometimes students use a structure in a wrong way because they don't know what the correct form of that is. It may be because they've never studied that or they've never been exposed to it. So in this case, we say this is an error. Sometimes the mistakes are because of students' lack of attention. I mean, they know the correct form, they've received the instruction on that point, but because of different reasons like fatigue, like stress, like lack of attention, they might not be able to produce the correct form in writing or in speaking. In this case, we say this is a mistake. Well, errors shouldn't be corrected on the spot because no matter how many times you try to correct an error, since students do not have the foundation for that correct structure, even if you keep correcting the error many times, students are likely to repeat that. But mistakes can be corrected. They sometimes are corrected by teacher's intervention, and there are different ways for that, like recasting, reformulation, echo-correcting, etc. Sometimes students can also be encouraged to self-correct themselves if teachers drop a hint and if they support their learners, because learners already know the structure, the correct form. They could be given hints and signals so they would know where they made the mistake and they would be able to fix the problem themselves. Now, errors are very precious because they could be used as starting points for teaching. Since they signal lack of knowledge, teachers can focus on these errors and they can be turned into opportunities where teachers can teach something new to learners. Let me give you an example. Imagine you have a group of low intermediate learners who've never heard anything about the subjunctive. And one of the students in the class says a sentence like, the doctor suggested that she loses weight. Well, now we know this is wrong because the subjunctive form needs to be used in this structure. And the correct form is, the doctor suggested that she lose weight, not she loses weight. So this is an example of an error in that class. Because as I told you, students have never heard of the subjunctive form. But what if students at that level, because of stress, because of excitement, because of lack of concentration, say something like, yesterday I studied a lot, instead of saying yesterday I studied a lot. Well, this is an example of a mistake. Now, teachers can correct mistakes or can encourage students to correct their mistakes, but errors need to be dealt with differently. Another thing is when to correct students' mistakes. Well, to be clear about this, I need to tell you that there are basically two types of activities. Activities that focus on accuracy and activities that focus on fluency. Accuracy-based activities are those activities in which students try to focus on a particular form. This could be a grammar form, it could be the use of vocabulary or pronunciation. These exercises are not usually interactive. I'm sure you've seen a lot of fill-in-the-blanks exercises after a grammar lesson, where students are given cues and they're supposed to complete incomplete sentences with the correct form of words given in parentheses. Well, number one, then number two, then number three, then number four. These are for individual practice, and students usually do not do the activity in pairs or in groups, at least in the first stages of the activity, because they try to focus on the form and get a mastery of the form. If there is a mistake at this stage, teachers can give students on-the-spot correction. So when one of your learners, for instance, reads question number 3 and then fills in the blank with the given word and then there is a mistake, you can interrupt the person on the spot and you can use different techniques like echo correcting, like reformulation, like recast. So the problem is identified and is fixed immediately. But when students engage in a fluency-based activities where students have questions and answers, like they interview one another or they speak at length about a topic to their friend or to a group of their friends. In this case, it's not a good idea to interrupt learners because of their mistakes. Well, The teacher's responsibility is to monitor students closely and take notes of their problems. It's always recommended that teachers have a notebook and listen to their students when they engage in pair works and group works. Without interrupting them, listen to them carefully, take notes of their mistakes, and after the activity is over, write those problems on the board, and together with the help of the learners, go through the correction stage, and then focus their attention on the right form, and then give them the feedback. This is also referred to as delayed correction. So teachers generally correct mistakes, not errors. There is no point in correcting errors unless you teach a lesson and then you give students practice on form and meaning. Later you can actually expect students not to have the problem while producing language. And if there is a problem, that's a mistake and you can correct a mistake. Now what happens if students' mistakes are not corrected? Well, we know practice makes perfect. If students are not given corrective feedback when they speak and they use a structure incorrectly, it is very likely that repeated mistakes accumulate and a sort of wrong habit is formed, and then it's later very difficult to undo this and to use the correct form instead of the incorrect form, because when we practice using the right structure, we'll get used to using that right structure. But if we keep practicing the wrong structure, subconsciously we'll use it in the future as well, and we really don't want this to happen in our classes. So when monitoring students, teachers need to pay attention to the sort of mistakes they have, to the sort of problems they have. They need to consider the level of the learners. Is this an error or this is a mistake? If it's a mistake, it can be corrected. If it's accuracy-oriented activity, then on-the-spot correction is okay. If it is a fluency-oriented activity, delayed correction is recommended. But if it is an error, you need to treat it. If it is way above the level of the learners, maybe you ignore it for the time being and you wait until you teach them the lesson, and then you give them enough practice so they would master the form. And if it is something you can actually deal with immediately, then it's not an error, probably it's a mistake. So you can use different techniques in order to deal with the mistake. But students need to receive feedback, corrective feedback, whether it is written feedback, whether it is individual feedback, oral feedback, immediate feedback, delayed feedback. Students need to be given feedback on their mistakes, because if they don't, they'll continue using the wrong form, and this is not good. Well, it's also important to pay attention to the point that sometimes students are sensitive because of their personality. Some students don't like it when teachers give them feedback right in front of their friends. So it's much better to give anonymous feedback to students. As I told you, it's a very good, it's a very good technique to take notes of students' mistakes while they're working in pairs or in groups, and then without mentioning who made which problematic sentence, you write it on the board after the activity, and you ask everybody in the class to pay attention to those erroneous, wrong sentences you put on the board, and then together with the help of the learners, you try to identify the mistake in the sentence, and then with the help of students, fix the sentence. And of course, the students who need it can take notes of that and then can practice it. But also it's recommended that if you see some students in the class keep repeating the same mistake, you give them individual feedback. That is, you can write the problem on a piece of paper with the name of the student on it, and after the class is over, you can hand it to the learner and you can say, I just noticed that you keep repeating this and this is not correct, and I recommend that you study this, for example, part of the book again, and you answer these questions. You give some extra practice. This could be controlled practice followed by some freer practice in the form of speaking about something, using that structure, and then giving it to the teacher. So students would also benefit from that individual practice and the feedback teacher gives them. Thank you very much for listening to this, for watching this video, and I would be more than glad to receive your comments and feedback on the video. If you would like to talk about different types of mistakes, different types of errors, and correction techniques, students, reactions to teachers giving them feedback, etc., I'll be more than glad to receive your comments. Thank you very much again, and hope to see you in other videos.